Welcome back to A Simple Word, in which we look at the gospel for the coming Sunday in order to help you to prepare to enter fully into the liturgy. On the second Sunday of Lent every year, we have the account of the Transfiguration of Christ. And this is essential. If we are to live this Lent well, we need to understand that Jesus Christ entered into his passion with enthusiasm. He was ready to die, not only because he knew of the resurrection, that his death was not an end, but he knew that we too would participate in the resurrection. So the passion leads to the glory of the resurrection. And this was something that his disciples did not understand. And the purpose of this Sunday is to help us to see how the passion does lead to the resurrection. What happens in the Transfiguration is that Jesus takes Peter, James, and John all by themselves up this mountain. And on top of the mountain, there's this transfiguration. Everything is bright. So whiter they say than the bleacher could make it. And Jesus is there with Moses and Elijah. Moses representing the Torah, Elijah representing the prophets. And the disciples saw this, and they knew it was wonderful, but they didn't really understand what it meant. And they said, Rabbi, it's good for us to be here. Maybe we should make some tents so you can stay here for a while. And then a voice comes from heaven, the voice of God. And it says, "This is my beloved Son. Listen to him." Listen to him. This is really key, because if we are to understand the Transfiguration, if we are to understand the resurrection, we need to first listen. If we look at this account from Mark, it's important to know that it's preceded by a couple of other moments. Peter had just professed his faith in Jesus Christ as a Messiah. And after he did this, Jesus had told them that he was going to enter into suffering and death, that the Son of Man must die, that he would be crucified. He told them this. And Peter tried to change his mind, and Jesus got upset and said, "No, get behind me, Satan." This is what precedes the Transfiguration. He had just told them about his passion, and they didn't understand. So he takes them up this mountain, and he lets them experience the resurrection. And God says in this voice, just listen to him. What's amazing is they come down from the mountain, and Jesus is telling them, okay, don't tell anybody what you see until the Son of Man has risen from the dead. And it says very clearly, they kept the matter to themselves, but they were questioning, what does rising from the dead mean? It's fascinating. They had just seen it. They just experienced it, but they didn't know what it meant. So here's a question for all of us. What can help us to listen to Jesus? What can help us to understand what he wants to tell us? How can we face the passion? How can we face suffering and not be afraid? And it's important that we listen to him. In this sense, the first reading for Sunday will help us, because there's the story of Abraham, who is asked to sacrifice his son Isaac. The account goes like this. There's a voice that says, Abraham, it's the voice of the Lord. And he says, here I am. Take your son Isaac, your only one whom you love, and go to the land of Moriah. There you shall offer him up as a holocaust. And Abraham takes him there. He takes him up there, goes up to the land of Moriah, up on this mountain, and then he places Isaac on the altar, and he reaches out and takes a knife, and he's about to slaughter him when the voice comes again. Abraham, Abraham. Again, Abraham says, here I am. This is amazing. Abraham, from the very beginning, says, here I am, willing to do the will of God. And here he is about to slaughter his son, which he thinks is the will of God. And he says, here I am, constantly open to listening to God. And God says, don't lay a hand on the boy. I know now how devoted you are to God, since you did not withhold from me your own beloved son. How was this possible? It was because Abraham knew that God could produce life out of death. Remember how many years Abraham had been walking with his wife in search of a land and with this promise that they would have a son, but they didn't have a son for many, many years. And Sarah had grown old and could not produce children anymore. In that sense, her womb was dead. But God gave her life. It wasn't dead because life comes from God. And Abraham knew he could look at his son Isaac and say, God can take life from death. He knew this. He knew that God could produce life out of death. And so he was not afraid. This is what helped him to listen to God. You know, Peter could say about Jesus Christ, you're the Messiah. But he couldn't foresee the resurrection. He just couldn't see it. As you listen to this gospel, you're going to be hearing the same words in which we hear of the Transfiguration, we hear the story of Abraham, and we hear the words, listen to him. We're going to hear about disciples who don't understand what resurrection from the dead means. So in front of this word, as you hear it, you're going to be asked this question. I invite you to ask this in your heart. Do you believe that God can raise you from death? Do you believe that God can raise you from death? If we have had the experience of suffering, pain, death, meaninglessness, whatever your experience has been, and we've come out of it, how is that possible? Can you recognize that God has been with you in the most difficult moments? There's some people in the face of death, all they can do is mourn forever. And you've even heard people say, I cannot forgive this. I can't let go of this. I invite you to spend the week reflecting on your experience of suffering and be prepared to hear this word. This is my beloved Son. Listen to him. Ask the Lord in this Eucharist to help you to listen to him so that your heart would be open to resurrection from the dead. And as you complete this time of Lent, preparing to celebrate the death and resurrection of Christ, you can experience this as something that you have in your own life. So thank you for listening. If you liked this sharing on the gospel for the coming Sunday, please press like and please come and listen to us again next week.